There was a line that everyone knew existed without anyone daring to name it clearly since the beginning of this conflict. Not a red line in the rhetorical sense that gets invoked in political statements and promptly forgotten. A real line drawn in geology and in global economics at the bottom of the Persian Gulf, where the largest natural gas field ever discovered extends beneath the surface between Iranian and Qatari territorial waters. On the Iranian side it was called South Pass. On the Qatari side it was called North Dome. Two names for the same geological treasure, shared by two countries that disagree on nearly everything except this immense underwater reserve that makes them mutually dependent and mutually vulnerable. Since February 28th, everyone with any analytical understanding of this conflict knew that if Israel or the United States struck that shared field, something fundamental in the conflict's dynamic would change. However, that was not a line being approached cautiously anymore. On March 18, 2026, the 20th day of this war, it was crossed. Iranian state television announced in the early hours of that day that portions of the South Pass gas field infrastructure had been struck by projectiles. A fire had broken out, fire crews had been dispatched. Production had been partially interrupted. Al Jazeera footage showed a column of black smoke rising above the processing facilities in Asaluya, the southern Iranian port city, where the infrastructure that extracts and treats gas from this enormous field is concentrated. Within hours of that announcement, European natural gas prices jumped 25%, then 35%. Brent crude broke through $110 per barrel, then $114. The markets had understood before the diplomats had finished formulating their statements. Something had just changed in this war, and the change did not point toward peace. Subscribe to From Report right now and turn on notifications. What happened on day 20 is not a single strike event. It is the moment when the economic consequences of this conflict began to exceed its military consequences as the primary structural force shaping its trajectory, and the analysis of what it means requires connecting every dimension simultaneously. Trump's response to the South Pass strike was characteristic in its contradictions and revealing in what those contradictions expose about the actual decision-making structure of this war. He posted on Truth Social that Israel, enraged by developments in the Middle East, had violently attacked the South Pass gas field, and he added immediately that the United States had no prior knowledge of the attack. This real-time disavowal, published by the President of the United States regarding the most consequential action taken by his closest military partner in a war he himself launched 3 weeks earlier, reaches a level of strategic incoherence that would be almost comic if the context were not devastating. It says either that Trump is not being truthful or that Israel is now operating with complete operational autonomy, conducting the most significant strikes of the campaign without informing its American partner in advance. Both possibilities are alarming. The Wall Street Journal, citing American officials, reported that Trump had in fact been informed in advance of Israel's plan to strike the gas field and had supported it. If accurate, that would make the Truth Social post a deliberate attempt at political self-protection, assigning responsibility to Israel for a decision Washington had approved in anticipation of the economic consequences that strike was certain to produce. The economic consequences arrived within hours. Iran did not wait for a diplomatic consultation cycle. The Iranian Joint Command published a communiqué stating that Iran was considering targeting the fuel, energy and gas infrastructure of the countries from which the attacks had been launched. Iranian state television published a list of potential targets. Those targets included oil and gas installations in Saudi Arabia, Qatar and the UAE. This was not a vague threat. It was a named, geolocatable, concrete declaration of intended targets. In the night of March 18th to 19th, Iran executed on that declaration. The Ras Laffan industrial complex in Qatar is the largest liquefied natural gas production site on Earth. Not the largest in the Middle East, not the largest in the region, the largest on the planet. It processes the gas extracted from the Qatari side of the same North Dome field that Iran exploits as South Pass on the other side of the maritime boundary. From Ras Laffan depart the LNG tankers that supply Europe, Japan, South Korea, China and India, every country that has built its economy on the promise of stable, affordable, liquefied natural gas supply. Ras Laffan is the cardiac pump of the global natural gas economy. In the night of March 18th to 19th, Iranian missiles struck it. Qatar Energy confirmed in the early hours of Thursday that several of its liquefied natural gas facilities had been targeted by missile fire, causing significant fires and considerable damage. The site was struck once on Wednesday evening and a second time on Thursday morning. According to Iranian state television, 2 successive strikes on the same target to make absolutely certain the message had been received. The Iranian logic is perfectly coherent, even if its economic brutality was something many analysts had refused to anticipate. It can be summarized in 2 sentences that constitute the reprisal doctrine Iran has been applying with remarkable consistency since the first day of this conflict. If you strike what feeds me, I strike what feeds you. And if you strike from the soil of your allies become targets. Qatar did not actively participate in the strikes against Iran. It had publicly condemned the Israeli strike on South Pass, calling Israel's action dangerous and irresponsible. But Qatar hosts the American airbase from which aircraft have been departing for missions related to this conflict. Qatar shares this gas field with Iran, the same field whose Iranian side Israel just struck. And Qatar had believed until the night of March 18th that it could shelter behind its diplomatic neutrality while continuing to host American forces on its territory. Iran explained with missiles on Ras Laffan that this position was no longer tenable. The scale of what the Ras Laffan strike means for the global economy requires a moment of precise quantification, because the numbers involved are large enough that the vocabulary of significant disruption does not adequately convey them. The Ras Laffan complex produces approximately 70 million tons of liquefied natural gas annually. For context, France's annual LNG consumption is approximately 20 million tons. Ras Laffan produces in 1 year enough to supply France's entire natural gas demand for more than 3 years. This single complex feeds long-term supply contracts with Europe, Japan, South Korea, India and China. Its partial shutdown, even temporary, even partial, creates disruptions in economies that are thousands of kilometers from the Persian Gulf and whose governments had no intention of becoming involved in this war. European natural gas prices jumped 35% in a matter of hours. Gas futures in Europe exceeded €68 per megawatt-hour, a level not seen since late 2022, when the Russian gas cut-off following the Ukraine invasion triggered a major energy crisis across the continent. And this time it is not a single supplier country being cut off. The Strait of Hormuz is partially blocked, South Pass is burning, Ras Laffan is in flames, the Samref refinery in Saudi Arabia was struck by an Iranian drone. The same night, Abu Dhabi closed its gas installations at the Asab and Bab fields following Iranian strikes. A vessel was hit by an unknown projectile east of the UAE in the Gulf of Oman near the strait. 2 Kuwaiti oil refineries were targeted. In the space of a single night, Iran executed its total economic warfare doctrine across the Gulf. If you host our enemies, if you permit strikes to be launched from your soil, we strike what sustains you. The security equation of every Gulf country was brutally recalibrated in the hours following the Israeli strike on South Pass,